And it is 11 p.m. so it's officially time to start. So welcome guys, welcome to Fleet Street. Today it's Thanksgiving, it's Thursday the 23rd of November. So if you're watching this and it's not the 23rd, you're probably watching the replay later on. So we are live from London. Which city in France? I'm from Brittany, and I heard. And so you've got the chat. Feel free to use it. If anyone was completely new to me, I'm Nathalie. Nice to have you along. And without further ado, let's go. So I'm here on Fleet Street, known as the Street of the Press, because we used to have the head office of many newspapers here. And this is one of the oldest pubs in the area, really. Not the original building, but this tavern has been here since 1549. It's the Old Deck Tavern. And as you can see, it used to be a gin palace as well. So we used to drink a lot of gin. Well, we still do, really. Oh, you're from Pays de Loire? Oh, nice. Well, I'm actually from Loire-Atlantique. And so guess what? It is haunted. The ghost story here started in the 80s. We had a young barmaid from Australia, and she was about to close. She actually went to the back to go out with a large bin bag. You know, she was just getting the rubbish out before to close. When the landlady, Sarah Kennedy, heard her scream and scream, so she came to assist the young barmaid, and she was like frozen. She was like, "Oh, I've seen a head, a floating head, a head. And the landlady was like, "Okay, relax, calm down, go upstairs." So they have those rooms upstairs. So she sent the barmaid to go upstairs and relax, and she told her to come back down whenever she was ready. And a few minutes later, the lady is upstairs, and then she heard screaming again. So she ran up, of course, to assist the young barmaid, and the barmaid was like, "That's him, that's him, that's him." She had spotted a portrait on the wall, literally a painting of Oliver Goldsmith, the playwright. So apparently, according to the young barmaid, the ghost, the floating head she had seen at the back, was the head of the playwright. It might be a coincidence, but he was indeed buried in the graveyard at the back at the Temple's Church. So maybe. Oliver Goldsmith would have frequented the pub. So did Dr. Johnson. So did Samuel Pepys. So it's been a busy place, but yeah, I love to tell you those ghost stories. But to be honest, in this area between here and the Strand, really, I know at least 3 stories of a ghost and then a floating head, and then being recognized on a portrait. So did they all happen, or did they get somehow mixed up over the years? Who knows? It's also a good marketing thing to have a ghost in your pub, so who knows? Anyway, this lovely gate here, this is the gate that leads to the Temple's Church. That was the headquarters of the Knight Templars. The Knight Templars, they were literally warrior monks. They would have gone to the Crusades and all that, but today it's difficult to imagine because they were highly trained soldiers, warriors, yet they were monks. They were, a lot of them were French, but they were international, really. And they were monks, so they had sworn to poverty. Yet they were one of the first international corporation, really. And they became extremely rich because people used to give them donations, whatever it might be, whatever they could afford. It could be a bag of potatoes. I don't know if we had potatoes yet, but a bag of apple or land. And they became so rich that some of the royalty became jealous, especially the King of France. and they started to be accused of any random crimes. They were accused of homosexuality, they were accused of some bizarre sexual rituals, they were accused of worshipping a mysterious head. That's actually possible. Some historians believe they might have been in the possession of the head of John the Baptist. So their religion could have been Joanism. Some even believe that they might have secretly converted to Islam. Who knows? But that was the beginning of their downfall. They were tortured, and some of them confessed, because, you know, when you are being tortured, sometimes you do confess anything. Welcome, herbivore. And up there, that's an amazing building that survived the Great Fire of London. It is known as the Prince Henry's Room. Prince Henry, he was the first son of James I. People tend to forget, but Charles I, you know, the one that was famously beheaded, he was not meant to be king, he was the spare. He had an older brother, Prince Henry. Henry sadly died quite young, so he never actually ruled, and that was his little office up there. Today it is some kind of a museum, but it's not really open to the public every day. It belongs to the City of London Corporation, and they only open it on special occasions. And this is the entrance to to Middle Temple's Lane. So Middle Temple, it's an inn of court. When you become a lawyer in this country, it's a bit like sorting hats in Harry Potter. You have to belong to one of the 4 inns of court. So you've got Temple Inn, Gray's Inn, what did I forget? Lincoln's Inn, and Inner Temple. So this is the little crest up there of the Middle Temple. And guess what? It is haunted. There's there are 2 dark stories behind those walls. There is Middle Temple Hall. It's an amazing, some kind of a banqueting hall. It's been redone after the war, but in Victorian times, apparently they did some kind of refurbishment, and it is said that they found a little box with a skeleton inside. It's yet to be identified, and there's a ghost that's meant to be walking down that lane. Some claim that it might be the ghost of the hanging judge Henry Hawkins, not Judge Jeffrey. We had 2 hanging judges really, so 2 judges that were a little bit too keen on the capital punishment. And Henry Hawkins, he actually lived there, so he could very well be haunting the place. Who knows? And as you can see, that was the site of an interesting tavern with the open house lorry was in September. The Prince Henry's room were opened, but I didn't get a chance to go because there was a busy month for me. So yeah, the Devils Tavern, interesting place. That would be interesting to visit it if it had not been destroyed in 1787. Apparently Samuel Johnson went there, Shakespeare's went there, so yeah, another interesting tavern. Now let me flip, why is it not focusing? Let me flip this camera around to show you the Temple's Bar. So this is one of the gateways into the City of London. When I say Kurt says Henry Hawkins presided over the trial of Dr. Thomas Cream. Yeah, for the ones that don't know, Thomas Neil Cream was a serial killer. He was killing sex workers with pills, poison. He was the judge in quite a few famous criminal cases at the time. Anyway, so this is the Temple's Bar. Today it's only a bar, but it used to be a proper gateway until the 1880s, really, because in the 1880s they had those like buses, you know, like double deckers on horse, behind a horse, but like double deckers anyway. So they were too large to go through that gate. So the gate was moved. It's actually closer to St. Paul's Cathedral now. So that column here, it's from the 1880s. And at the top, it might be hard to see, but there's a dragon. Sometimes people say it's a griffin, but it's not, it's a dragon. When you see the front of a dragon, you are entering the city of London. So again, when I say the city, I know it can be a bit confusing when you are from abroad. The city as the old city, the city with a capital C. We've got 32 districts in London. The city is only one of them. On this side here, you see Queen Victoria. On the other side, later on, we'll see Prince Albert. And back in the days, back in the 1600s, when it was an actual gateway, they had some spikes. What did they put on the spikes? The heads of the traitors that were beheaded. They used to be on the south side of the London Bridge, but then they moved them here. And when they invented the telescopes, there was a chap standing where I am now that was actually renting his telescope. So you could give him a penny to zoom in and see the crows or the pigeons picking on those rotting heads. So quite a gruesome spectacle, really. But you know, it was before Netflix. We didn't have much else to do. And let me show you a members club. So this is the Wigon Pen. It was a restaurant, but before to be a restaurant, it was a members club. It's not Prince Albert, it's her son. Oh, interesting. Before to be a restaurant, it was a club. You know those clubs that you had, on everywhere, really. In the 18th centuries, they had clubs for everything. So this one was a club for lawyers, and it is also said to be haunted. They said that there was a solicitor that worked himself to death. Today there's nothing inside. There used to be an office until not that long ago, but there's not much inside anymore. And the clubs, you know, in the 18th centuries, we had all those clubs for anything, really. A bit like today we have those Facebook groups, you know. You might have a Facebook group for people that like feeding the foxes. You might have a Facebook group for people that like sunbathing naked or going fishing. In the 18th century, you had those clubs. And would you believe they even had a farting club? Yes, you've heard this right. A farting club. Ooh, Kurt is saying it's claimed to be hunted by Oliver Cromwell also. Oh, I've not heard this one. Yes, those farting clubs, I don't really want to know what they were doing in there. Well, I kind of do know. They were eating cabbage or whatever and then having a go. If that's something you are into yourself, I'm not judging, you know, we all have different hobbies. But yeah. Anyway, let's have a look at Twinings. So Twinings, the tea brand, but it's not only a brand, it is history. I mean, the history of tea in this country, you know, dates back to quite a while. The history of tea in general dates back to before Christ in China. There's a little legend that one guy was with his pot of boiling water and a leaf flew down into the water and then he had a sip and it was wonderful. And the Twinings, it's a family name from Thomas Twinings. The shop itself, it's from the beginning of the 18th centuries. And the logo there, the Twinings branding, that's the oldest logo still in its original position. The shop did not actually start as a tea shop. It used to be a coffee house. It was called the Golden Lion, so that's why you have a golden lion at the top. But those coffee houses, they were for men, really. They were for men to talk about the world or about, politics or philosophy or whatever it might be. Ladies were not really allowed. And when they started selling tea was extremely expensive at the time. It was heavily taxed. The fashion came because of Catherine of Braganza, the wife of Charles II. She used to love her tea. She was from Portugal. And they wanted to sell tea to take away, so they had to allow ladies to come in. And the logo today, so you've got the little lion at the top, you've got those two little tea traders, and the little crest that you see in the middle, that's what we call a royal warrant. So as a brand, to get a royal warrant, it's a massive bonus. You'd have to be supplying Buckingham Palace for at least 5 years, and the monarch has to give their agreement. They have to be, of course, reviewed now that Charles is king, but they are always reviewed every 3 to 5 years anyway. And I doubt Twinings would ever lose their warrant. So you can see that little logo on quite a few packaging, like the ketchup heads or the gin Gordons. If you want to know which toilet paper they use at the palace, it's actually Andrex, the one with the little dog. They don't have the royal warrant on the packaging, but when you see the listing, it's actually there. And yes, exactly. William Hogarth actually did. He, instead of buying a lot of tea, he actually painted a portrait of Thomas Twining. So then he got lots of tea in exchange. But at the time, it was very, very expensive until. I think it's at the time of William Pitt the Younger. They cancelled that tax on tea because then they did the tax on windows and everything. But before that, tea was heavily taxed. And anyway, we are now in front of a lovely pub, the George. A pub, it's short for public house. So when you have a good pub, you're meant to feel like you are in somebody's living room. You know, you're meant to feel very cozy and Kurt is saying Jane Austen used to be asked by her mother to come and buy tea there. Yes, I've heard that as well. Yeah, and so yeah, the pub is haunted. Let me cross over. Yes, thank you. The ghost story actually started here in the 70s. Really, they were doing some refurbishment at the pub when, there were a few staff, but there was a painter that went down to the basement, and he comes back 20 minutes later. He's all white, like if he had seen a ghost. And the landlord was like, "You okay, mate? You look a bit white." And the guy was like, yeah, it's that fellow down there. He was just staring at me for 20 minutes. And the landlord was like, who was there staring at you? And the painter insisted. He was like, yeah, that guy down there, you know, dressed up like all historical, like a knight or whatever. And then the landlord said, "Oh, don't worry, that's the ghost. My wife sees him all the time." So apparently they're quite happy with their ghost. He's a friendly ghost, so they've nicknamed the ghost itself the George. So they have a room upstairs. They used to do comedy gigs upstairs, so that's quite cool. Anyway, if you come into this area at daytime and you really need to urinate, well, I can confidently recommend those toilets here. I've actually never been, because you can just step into a pub if you want to pee. But look at that. They won the Loo of the Year award. So that must be a good loo. I never knew the award existed until I did the research for that tour. But yeah. And Kurt is talking about Samuel Johnson. There we are. Dr. Johnson is in front of us. I've just casually called him doctor. He wasn't really a doctor. He did not, he went to university in Oxford, but He did not actually graduate from university, but when he finally wrote the first English dictionary, it wasn't really the first. They had tried to do one in Tudor times, but he went back to his university and he was like, "Oh, can I get my degree now?" So they gave him an honorary degree, but he didn't actually graduate as a doctor. So Samuel Johnson, you might have heard of him. He's very much known for the phrase, "A man tired of London is a man tired of life, for there is in London all that life can afford." And I have to say, I agree. I don't think you can ever get bored of London. This is St. Clement's Day, and you might see some impacts on the walls from the bombings of the Blitz. We decided to keep them as a little memento. Samuel Johnson, we'll talk about him a little bit more in a while because we'll go and see where he used to live. Little less known fact about Dr. Johnson, he very probably suffered from Tourettes syndrome. He had some verbal tics. At the time, of course, it was a condition that was not diagnosed. It was not known at all. And sadly, they, at the time they just didn't understand the disease, and they would, apologies for the term, but at the time they would sometimes almost consider him as mad until they met him and they realized he was perfectly coherent. Of course, the syndrome was only diagnosed years later by George Gilles de la Tourette. And it's important, I think it's important to remember, because of course there's a lot of young people today that suffer from Tourette's, and it's nice to know that there have been some very important people in history that probably had the same syndrome. He very probably suffered from OCD as well. He had some obsessive behaviors, like always the same foot going inside the staircases or any entrance. So yeah, very interesting gentleman. And while we're here, see those little metal thingy here? That is to stop the skater boys for doing skating figures. So it's not for the homeless, it's for the skater boys. Anyway, we are now in front of this beautiful neo-Gothic building, the Royal Court of Justice. So that's from the 1880s. Before that, it was a little, almost like a maze of very tiny, dark streets that were a bit scary. When you went down that maze, you actually had to pay a little boy with a lantern. You'd give them a penny and they'll take you to wherever you wanted to go. There's a little story here from the 18th century that apparently once a gentleman came in and he refused to pay a boy. He ventured on his own in those dark little streets and he was never seen again. I don't know if there's any truth behind it. And it's, if you wanted to see the British justice system at work, you can actually come. You don't have to be British. Anyone could go in and see that. I have been myself a couple of years ago when my sister came to visit, and she had already done most of the touristic attractions in London. So she was like, "What are we gonna do?" And I was like, "I don't know. Do you wanna go and see a trial?" So we came here. It can be a little bit intimidating at first because, of course, you don't quite know where you're going and stuff. So I went straight to the lady and I was like, "Oh, is there any good cases on today?" Like if I was going to the theater. And she said, "Oh, all the cases are good here. But if you want the criminal court, you want to go towards the right." So that's where we went. And it's quite impressive because, the lawyers, they really have those little wigs, those little white wigs. And once they put them on, the show is starting, like you can see really before to put the wig on, they're really casual, and suddenly, boom, we're on. The case I've actually seen two. It was actually really difficult to understand what it was about, really, because they don't really give you a synopsis of what you've missed, because it was the second day or maybe the third day of the trial when we got there. So you love the trials but hate to be jury. Well, yes, that's probably a very hard job to be a jury. Luckily, I won't be invited to be a jury because I think you have to be British. And look, this is St. Martin's of Tours. Some of you were with me when we did a tour in Tours a year ago almost now. So he's the man. So yeah, I think it would be a good experience to be a jury, but I'd have to get a British passport first if I want to be invited. Anyway, we are now arriving on Bellard. So for many of you, that might ring a bell. So this is the site where Miss Lovett in Sweeney Todd, you know, in the story, where she has a pie shop, where she sells the best pies in London. And some of you might know those pies are actually made with human meat. It's probably more interesting in London than Baltimore. Well, you know, we never know. I suppose there are some interesting cases everywhere. My case was not that, well, it was a young boy, a young man from the gypsy community. His lawyer kept insisting that he was a gypsy, but I couldn't even understand what the crime was. I know he had buried something, but after spending like 45 minutes in there, we still didn't know what the crime was. Clearly not a body, because the penalty would have been far worse. So it's actually difficult to understand. If you don't catch the beginning of the trial, it's really difficult to understand what's going on, really. Anyway, so back to Miss Lovett. So the Sweeney Todd story, as far as we know, it is fictional. It's debatable. Some people believe that it might have happened, potentially in Paris, but the actual story we know with Miss Lovett and all that, it's a fiction. And see this beautiful pub there? This is the old Bank of England. It was a branch of the Bank of England at some point. Now it's a pub with an interesting deco. You can actually go inside and sit on a barber's chair. So you can pretend to be a victim of Sweeney Todd. And they have a bit of well, they've got a lot of deco connected to money, of course, because they used to store money, and a bit of deco connected to Sweeney Todd. So quite a cool pub. Because at the back they have a double-decker, one of those old Routmasters. So you can also have a drink in a bus. And so back to Sweeney Todd is so the I'm sure did any of you see the musical? Did most of you see it? The story that most people are aware of, it's really the musical. Whether you've seen the musical in Broadway or whether you've seen the movie recently with Johnny Depp. But the original story was actually published in 1845 as a penny dreadful. The penny dreadful, they were a new type of literature. They had just invented the penny press, so you know the steam press. So suddenly literature was much cheaper. It was much more accessible to many more people. And you had those boys on the street selling little chap books. And those penny dreadful or penny blood, sometimes they were called, they were often inspired by actual murder cases. But they were fiction. For example, we might have spoken about Eliza Grimwood in my tour of Waterloo. Eliza Grimwood, real murder case. There were a couple of penny dreadful published about her, but those were fictions. So for people it could be a bit confusing because we were talking about actual names of murders, murder victims, but fictional. So it could be all very confusing, really. And sadly, a lot of young boys used to read them. So a lot of young teenagers were confronted to very explicit and very violent literature. That led to a few actually crimes from youngsters. And We are here in front of Sanduston in the west. Oh, there was an interesting TV show called Penny Dreadful. Oh, nice, I've not heard of it. So Sanduston in the west, because we also have Sanduston in the east. That doesn't really look like a church anymore. It's ruined, but it's beautiful. And we've got one of those old fountains here. This one looks a little bit creepy. This one is from 1860. Not that I remember the date of random fountains, it's just that it's written at the bottom. And yes, exactly, Kurt. So the name of the Penny Dreadful was the String of Pearls. And let me just show you here quickly. We've got a beautiful clock up there with two giants. So this is Gog and Magog. They are pre-Roman gods, so they're ringing the bells here. And we have Queen Elizabeth I. There she is. And you can see that it was the street of the press, because you've got the People's Journal, or all those names connected to. At some point, most of the newspapers had their head office here. They've moved now. There's none of them left, but yeah. And this is number 186 Fleet Street. So again, it's a fictional address, but it is here that Sweeney Todd would have had his actual hairdresser salon. And what you can see in the middle, that's one of those press, those printing press. So Sweeney Todd, for the ones that don't know the storyline, he was basically a barber that killed some of his customers. Not all. The ones that came from away, the ones that were not going to be missed, the ones that were a bit lonely. And he would drop down the bodies through a tunnel that would connect to the Miss Lovell pie shop, where she would bake them into pies that sold very well, the best pies of London. Now, the Penny Dreadful is from the 1840s, but the story is actually set in 1785. So they used a time further away in the past to highlight the fears that they had in Victorian times. Because in the beginning of the 1800s, because of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people moved into the cities. So suddenly they didn't know their bakers anymore. They didn't know their butchers. So they were worried about what they ate. The sausages at the time were known as bag of mystery, because you didn't know what you were eating. It's not so different from today, really. Some of you might remember the horse meat scandal we had in Europe a few years ago. And so those meat pies with human flesh, it was not actually the first time in literature that they were mentioned. There was a Dickens where he had already mentioned it a few years earlier. It was not the full story, but there was a character called Tom Pinch in Martin Chuzzlewit that was already baking human meat. So it was a common fear at the time. And there's a lot of differences, though, in the original story, the original Penny Dreadful, and the musical. Michael Bond, Christopher Bond, I always confuse them. Christopher Bond, when he did the musical, he actually tried to make Sweeney a sympathical villain. So he invented the story of him coming back from Australia about a crime he did not commit. And Joanna, in the original story, she's a random stranger. In the musical, she's the daughter. Miss Lovett, in the musical, they are lovers. You know, they are business partners and lovers. In the original story, they're only business partners. And in the original story, Sweeney is not motivated by any stories of the past. He's just evil. So there are a few differences there. And if you've seen the movie with Johnny Depp, there are also a few anachronisms. So The story, as we mentioned, is from, it's meant to be set in 1785. Well, at the beginning of the story, Sweeney is coming back from Australia on a ship, and they go under the Tower Bridge. The Tower Bridge is 1894, so it's literally a century later. And at some point, he's grabbing a portrait, a photograph of his late wife. There was no photography in 1785, so there are a few anachronisms there. And as far as we know, it is fictional. I know some people kind of argue that it might have happened in Paris, but as far as I know, there's no evidence of any of that. Anyway, let's go into that little court here. So this is Crane Court. In 1767, there was a little court that was parallel to this one called Fleur de Lys Court. It's no longer here today, so I'm showing you this one instead. It was literally like 5 meters away. And in Fleur de Lys Court, you had a lady called Elizabeth Bronwyn. She was, she was really an early 18th century scammer. She was a midwife. She actually worked with the parish. So, you know, at the time, the parish, the church, was the parish, but it was almost like the council today. You know, they would deal with the poor. They were almost like they were the local authority, really. And she worked as a midwife in the workhouses, and she helped a lot of ladies giving birth. And so from the outside, she was a very respectable local lady. So she lived here on Fleur de Lys Court, and thank you so much, Elizabeth. And she decided to take some apprentices. Well, one at first. Those apprentices, they were pretty much paid by the parish. Not paid, but the parish would give you items of clothing and enough to feed them, and you were meant to teach them a trade. They usually had a month, like a trial month. If the apprentice did not suit the family or the other way around, they could cancel. But after that, they were bonded with a contract. So Elizabeth, she had a husband. He was a painter, and a son as well, a painter as well. She took a first apprentice, and apparently she treated her okay for a month. And after that trial period was done, she was terribly abusing her. But horrible abuse. We're talking very, very violent physical beatings. She was stripped naked and whipped. And she then took a second, thank you very much, Lynn, a second apprentice. Again, she was meant to teach them a trade, but sadly, they actually used them as servants, and then they were terribly, terribly beating them up. But from the outside, she was such a respectable lady. No one could suspect that. And the first apprentice managed to escape. At night, she knew that they left the key on the door. So one night, she ran away. She was picked up on the street, and she was brought back to the Founding Hospital. It's like one of the first charities, really. And she was badly bruised everywhere. She was in a terrible state. She had lost the eyesight in one eye. So the Founding Hospital, they actually sent a letter to James Bronwyn, so the husband, to ask about, how come she was not well treated. James never replied, and would you believe they let it go? So there was already one more apprentice that was there, and then Elizabeth decided to take another one. So she now had two girls that were badly, when I say mistreated, I mean, we're talking, one of them had her tongue cut out. They were all called Mary, the three of them. And one day Mary's stepmother decided to come and visit. And of course, they couldn't show her to the stepmother because she was actually locked in those coal cabinet. And she was completely bruised. I mean, horrible story. And eventually she tried to escape as well. And she was caught by the son on the street. He brought her back. And then one of the neighbors, so they were in a little court like this, and one of the neighbors actually spotted that young girls, those girls were like 14 years old, severely beaten and all starved in the courtyard. So he actually told the authorities, and Elizabeth, she ran away. She was later caught. And she was hanged, luckily, because the third girl, she actually died of the injuries. So Elizabeth was hanged. She was dissected, and her skeleton was actually kept on display. But to show you how such a horrible person can come across as lovely, working for the parish, and be so respectable from everyone else outside. And it's always later on that they do some adjustment. But of course, the Foundling Hospital, after that, they started to do many more checks on people that were receiving any of those apprentices. But yeah, horrible lady. Oh, thank you, Nathalie. And let's go and take a look at where Dr. Johnson used to live. We'll take a sharp left here. I'm gonna have to lower the sound of my voice because there's a homeless gentleman that sleeps in there. There's a little shelter there, and I know he's here tonight because I walked my route. So I'm gonna speak a little bit lower than I usually am. So Dr. Johnson, of course, is known for the first English dictionary. He was commissioned to do it, but he was asked how long would he need, and would you believe he said 3 years? Bear in mind there was already a French dictionary, and Académie Française, they had spent 40 years writing it, and there's actually many more words in the English vocabulary that there is in French. So he said 3 years. It was never done in 3 years, but he actually made it in 9. So not bad. But he was paid in one go, and he actually ran out of money. And he had some terrible health issues as well. Not only Tourette's, but he had a terrible eyesight. So it was difficult for him to work at night because, at the time they were using candlelight, so he used to burn his wig when you're getting too close to the candle. And very interesting gentleman. And he actually had a servant that worked for him that used to be a slave. And would you believe when he passed away, Dr. Johnson actually left a lot of his money and belongings to his servant. Just gonna be quiet. Right. Yeah, I just didn't want to wake him because it's probably quite hard to fall asleep on those cold pavements. So yeah, we don't want some noisy YouTubers waking people up. Anyway, so this is the place. So this is where Dr. Johnson used to live. It's now a little museum. I've actually never been inside. I really should. But yeah. Yes, exactly. Francis Barber, his name was. And of course, some of you might already know, but Dr. Johnson had a cat. His name is Hodge, and there's a little statue of Hodge down here. And Hodge today has a friend, a snowman. There's a little trail of snowmen in around Fleet Street at the moment, so it's a Christmas display. So you've got a snowman here, and here is Hodge. So Hodge actually speaks. There's a little QR code at the bottom that you can scan, and Hodge speaks to you. I cannot scan it because my phone is, of course, busy, but I've recorded it for you. Let's play Hodge.
Hello, and meow. Good of you to call by. I don't mind if you stare at me. Take a good look at me. Examine my expression. I am justifiably proud. I preside in Gough Square in all my glory. Let me tell you about myself. I'll try and do that without hesitation. subject of poems and plays and epitaphs. I'm quite the feline celebrity. In the 1760s, I resided here with my esteemed owner, Dr. Samuel Johnson, that great man of letters. His masterpiece, Johnson's Dictionary, on which I am sitting, is universally acclaimed. My favorite word.
Oops, sorry. Hold on. I've accidentally touched the button. I was trying to light it up. Oops.
I much prefer shellfish. Each afternoon, Dr. Johnson would pause from his writing to go out and buy me a plate of fresh oysters. This devotion was noted with some irritation by Dr. Johnson's friend and biographer, James Boswell. He wrote that I was treated with great indulgence. But then, Boswell was never a cat lover. Indeed, he wrote how he suffered a good deal in my presence. I can only say the distaste was mutual. I always made a special point of twining myself among Boswell's legs, as if affectionately, so I could get hairs on his trousers. Cats do that, you know. Upon my death, the poets mourned me. Elegies were written. Hundreds of years later, Samuel Beckett cast me in one of his plays. My fame even spread to America, where Vladimir Nabokov included me in an epitaph. But what care I for these strangers? What matters is that Dr. Johnson thought me a very, very fine cat indeed. Now there's something to purr about.
Meow. Hi, Janice. So, my bicycle is still here, so that's a good sign. Let's go and take a look at a pub. According to me, the oldest pub in London. It's very much debatable. There are many different ways to, you have some buildings that are very old, but the license is not that old. You have some pubs that are very old, but the building is completely new. But this one here, the Ye Olde Cheshire Cheese, it's been rebuilt after the Great Fire of 1666. So really, and when you go in there, you kind of see it's really old, and it really looks like a movie set. If you can you see the step under the metal bar? They had to put a metal grill, like a railing, because the step is so used from people stepping there. You can see the list of all monarchs under which they've been. They need to add Charlie, and they used to have a parrot in the 1920s. His name was Polly the parrot, and Polly was he was known to be able to swear in 9 different languages. Because the parrots, they kind of repeat whatever is being said in the pub. So Polly was actually very famous. When Polly died, it was all over the press, all over the globe. They even made it to the Chinese newspaper. To be fair, when you live on Fleet Street, it's not that hard to end up in the newspapers. And so the pub had some very famous drinkers like Mark Twain's or Charles Dickens. Quite a few famous names have come through. And we've discovered that in the 18th century, upstairs, it might have been a bit of a brothel. And we know that for sure because when they did some refurbishment in the 1960s, they found some tiles, like bathroom tiles. Let me show you. They are a bit graphic, so if you do not want to see any 18th century pornography, close your eyes for a moment. There we go. So that's what they found upstairs when it was on top of the fireplace. Let me show you some more. I think now they are in the collection of the Museum of London. So yeah. That's how we know almost for sure that it might have been a brothel, like many establishments at the time. A lot of the coffee houses and stuff, they had some special services upstairs. So yeah, naughty tiles. Anyway, it's gonna be the end of the tour. So do let me know if you have any questions. I'll show you my face again. Thank you very much for coming tonight. If you wanted to see a bit more of me, on Sunday we're heading to Poplar to talk about Elizabeth Stride. So we've done that tour before in different locations. We went to her burial place the first time. Then we went to St. Giles when she got married. And on Sunday we'll talk about her life and her time in Poplar. It's not the most exciting area, but I know quite a few wanted to see it because we've never been there on my tours, so why not? And talking about Ripper victims, I don't know if you'll see much. See the top of the church spire there? That it's St. Bride's. That's where Polly Nichols got married, the second victim. Polly used to live here when she was young. She lived just off Fleet Street. Thank you, Janie. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks ever so much. Thanks, everyone, for coming. If anyone was new to me, well, I hope you'll come back. Do give me a subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you see my next tours. And have a good evening. Have a good Thanksgiving. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye.